Welcome to another episode of Courageous Conversations Live. I'm your host, Pierre Quinn, and here on Courageous Conversations, we're leveraging the stories of leaders, of creatives, of entrepreneurs to help you live and lead with greater courage. Now, I know this is going to be a great conversation today because we had some technical difficulties for the first time in the history of Courageous Conversations Live. It just blocked us and said, you cannot go live. But we are live, and my guest for this episode is Donald Bedney III. Donnie, thanks for being my guest today.
Hey, man, thanks for having me. Happy Tuesday.
I'm glad to be here with you. You might have to go in on posts and reshare. If you're watching this on LinkedIn, if you're watching it on Facebook, if you're watching it on YouTube, I need you to do a few things for us. Number one, hop in the comment section. We love doing shout outs here on Courageous Conversations Live. So that's very important. Number two, hit that share button. I promise you, our guest today is going to drop so much insight. You're gonna be mad that you didn't grab a pencil and a piece of paper before we started. And number three, I know you'll have questions. Drop those in the comment section as well. We'll take as many questions as we can before time runs out in our conversation, and we'll be talking about building the dream. So Mr. Bedney, give us the snapshot, the 30-second Cliff Notes elevator pitch version of who you are and what you do.
So Donnie Bedney. I'm currently president of PSP Metrics, which is an employee assessment company that's nearly 80 years old. I would say that that's primarily what I do from a career perspective. Outside of that, husband, daddy to a 1.5-year-old beautiful little girl, Sophia, who's back in Boston right now, and that's me in a nutshell.
So give us, let's pull back the curtain, let's hop in the time machine and talk about when the entrepreneurial bug first bit you and you had this dream of building enterprises and being a business owner.
Yeah, so interesting question, man. And the place that I'll go is just when I was about 13, I read a book entitled "Why Should White Guys Have All the Fun?" Mm-hmm. And that is the life story of a gentleman by the name of Reginald Lewis. And that was kind of the entrepreneurial bug, if you will. It was the first time that I actually learned that you could buy companies. And it was if you've ever seen the cover of that book, it's, a well-dressed black man, seasoned executive with a cigar and appears to be in some sort of lofty office kind of overlooking the city. And so to have somebody who looked like me, and at that point, I guess he what was it, the largest international acquisition at that point in the late 80s of $987 million for Beatrice Foods, I believe was the number. And that was the beginning where I was just like, well, I can not only buy companies, but I could be my own boss. I could, be an entrepreneur.
Well, so when you're looking at a cover of a book like that and thinking about your own personal journey and narrative up to that point, was there anything in your life that aligned with what he was suggesting, even by the book cover, the book title, that you had seen in your personal experience growing up that made you think, yeah, like I can really do something different than maybe I thought about before?
Yeah, not at that point. Transparently, not too many entrepreneurs in my family, at least that I knew about as a teenager. So didn't get to witness it. In a funny way, my grandfather, on my mom's side, his name's Ephraim Dunn, goes by Eph, actually, Eph the Chief. If you've ever been to Shaker Heights Country Club in Cleveland, Ohio, really kind of, was a major father figure for me. And so while he wasn't an entrepreneur, he taught me just so many lessons about the value of relationships. I met a bunch of business owners through working with him and through his relationships, as well as folks in private equity, presidents of banks, and, a bunch of other things. And so shortly thereafter, I ended up meeting people who were kind of doing it. But at that point in my life, as I was finishing the book, I had nobody.
There's, watching you over social media for a few years now before we actually met and had a conversation. I mean, our circles overlap in so many ways, but it was only until recently that we actually had a conversation. But I remember watching on social media not too long ago, you posted something and you were talking about this upcoming trip that you are getting ready to take to the continent of Africa. And I was like, what is this guy? It was like the post was really lofty and really aspirational
Mm,
about, the amazing things on the horizon for you and what you were dreaming about. Can you give
hmm
some context of how you ended up on that trip? What was it about and how that really changed your
Sure.
worldview and your perspective of what's possible?
Oh man. So, being born in America, being black in America, um, I always kind of had a desire to get back to the continent of Africa in some way, and got a rare opportunity actually through MLT. Well, I guess it was a partnership with MLT, the Milken Institute, African Leadership Network, and also EcoNet. And so they created a fellowship called the Africa Business Fellowship. I participated in the second cohort for that fellowship, and they were trying to take up and coming US business leaders and connect them with some of the fastest growing companies on the continent in whatever capacity, just depending on your experience. And so, long story short, I ended up getting paired with a company, Duma Works, based in Nairobi, a technology platform that really was working with small and medium sized enterprises to help them attract, acquire talent. And they were also looking to grow within multinationals. And so I worked basically as a chief operating officer for Duma for just under 4 months. And still have an amazing relationship. Shout out to Ariel, who's the co-founder for Duma and was CEO while I was there. And just an amazing time, man. Living, working in Nairobi, it was the first time that I ever lived in another country, and also the first time that I lived in a country where I was the majority. Meaning, Nairobi, I believe, is like 80%, maybe even 90% Black. And so it turned into just a life-changing experience for me, from a worldview perspective, from a value perspective, as I thought about myself as a leader. It was an opportunity for me to, serve as an executive and lead an organization. And at least for me, within the U.S., we typically have kind of a pretty linear system, right? And so it really kind of moved me outside of this, I'll say, check the box kind of mentality,
Mhm.
where it was, I need to be a great individual contributor. And then if I'm a great individual contributor, I'll become a manager. And if I'm a great manager, then maybe I'll become a director one day. And then if I'm a great director, then hopefully somebody makes me an associate VP, and I won't continue just making up titles, going up. But I think I think you catch what I'm saying.
Yeah.
It was just very clear at that point that I was capable of doing more than, kind of what I was currently doing. And I made a phone call, actually literally stepped outside and made a phone call to a longtime mentor and now business partner of mine, Brendan Anderson, who's actually the founder of ScaleCo. And I told him, I said, hey, Brendan, like, I'm in Nairobi, things are going well, having a great time. I'm ready to run something. One of the biggest challenges, I think, as I've looked back at, my desire to do this, is deal flow. Would you be willing to help me with that? And from that conversation, he said, absolutely yes. And we were intentional about beginning to look for a business or an opportunity for me to, run something and kind of, purchase my first company. And about 3 years later, we got that opportunity.
How far of a pivot is this from what you were thinking when you were doing your MBA? Because I'm looking on your LinkedIn profile right now, and it says you have an MBA in finance and sports management.
Mm-hmm.
How do you go from conceptualizing what you're studying in finance and sports management to space where you're in Nairobi saying, "Hey, I'm ready to run something," ready to lead a venture. Was that,
Yeah.
were those things that you were wrestling with while you were doing your MBA, or is it really a huge sort of pivot for you from what you were conceptualizing then to what you were conceptualizing at that time?
Man, that's a fantastic question. Transparently, Pierre, I've had a challenge kind of my first time working with my grandfather. So it was about, I was 13 years old, working at Shaker Heights Country Club, in the men's locker room. And as I mentioned earlier, it was the first time I got around owners, right? There wasn't a lot of conversation that I witnessed in there about what degrees people had. It was more about the businesses that they were running. It was more about their relationships. It was more about their families. My grandfather ended up dropping out of college and coming home to, really provide for the family. And this man has relationships with, some of the most powerful and influential people, I'd say in Cleveland, Ohio, but, probably in the US, as a result of these deep relationships. And so that actually was a paradigm shift for me. If you can imagine, just graduating from, middle school, and then, going to high school and even college, and then later in grad school, where people were continuing to tell me that, education and this degree and this specific course is really going to, be the key to your success in the future. It was very difficult for me to to believe that when my non-formal education really began at Shaker Heights Country Club, where relationships and people who owned businesses, appeared to really be just kind of in a different place, where you could hire other people, etc. And so it's probably a slightly different answer to, your question, but the owner aspect was always something that became very clear to me, and also the value of building relationships. I think one of the biggest values of formal education, actually is the ability to have access to a network of people where you have shared experience, right? And I'm not saying that, some of the technical pieces, one of the reasons I wanted to get the finance concentration is because I was trying to increase my financial IQ, right? If I ever wanted to run a business, I felt like it would be important for me to have some sort of foundation there. Now, I'm not a CPA, right? But I hope that, my CFO, maybe has a CPA, or at least, a deep understanding of financial statements. But when I think about, chairmen and CEOs that I've supported, previously in my career, their financial acumen, slash IQ tends to be extremely high, but is very focused on the business and industry that they're running, as opposed to necessarily like an academic exercise around, income statements or cash flow statements.
Let's talk about, you mentioned being around founders. Can you give us some insight to conversation at the founders level? Maybe not when we're hanging around at the country club, but when you're sitting in a meeting with a founder, what distinguishes that conversation in a meeting with a group of founders versus a conversation from merely just a group of maybe executives in a large company? They're doing great work, they're extremely successful. It's not their company, even though they're successful executives, versus how business is looked at from a founder's point of view.
Okay. One of the things for a few people that I consider, mentors and people that I admire from a business perspective, I believe that I've observed that a lot of their conversations are about the future, and what things should be, how how they see things kind of shaping, and they have really more of a long-term view, which I believe is based on, just a clear foundation and understanding of what their business is today, what the industry is that they serve, and also the needs of their clients, and then beginning to have just an innate ability to anticipate what the future is going to look like, and to really keep that holistic view, and they have an ability to kind of step outside of the myopia of some of the day-to-day managers of businesses, where they're putting out fires so much throughout the day, that, at times they don't necessarily get to take that long-term view of where their organization should be going, or where their industry and, client partners are going in the future.
Well, we were talking in a previous conversation, you hit me with this concept, and I want you to maybe take a little time and do a deep dive on it. We were talking about a particular industry and how sometimes as creatives and entrepreneurs and as leaders, we want to fight for so many years to build credibility in a certain industry, to get to a point where we build that credibility, where we're established as a name, where our good product or service is notable. And it could, it could take 10, 20, 30 years, depending on how hard you work in order for that to happen. But then there is also the opportunity for us to buy a portfolio, to buy success, to leverage the success of other people, maybe in an industry who are transitioning to a different place. One, why do you think that's something? Why doesn't that conversation come up more? And two, what are the fears and apprehensions that people have to get over in order to go down that road as a leader?
So I believe that where you're leading me to is to discuss acquisition entrepreneurship a little bit, and I will talk about it. So I think that there's a lot of once again, I think it really comes down to linear thinking, right? And so as we talk about formal education and kind of our system. And I'm not necessarily a historian, but I'll give my general understanding. If you think about our formal education system, it was created from the perspective that we needed more formal education in order to continue to grow the country from like the Industrial Revolution, right? And so we needed workers in order to continue to build that. Now, the interesting aspect to me is there has kind of be created some additional fear, if you will, of the unknown. And so a lot of times there's a comfort that having a 9-to-5 or, a consistent paycheck or whatever kind of builds, in my opinion. Now, the interesting aspect and why, this conversation doesn't come up as much is I just think that there's not necessarily a lot of people who are going out and looking to buy businesses. But there are organizations that exist and companies that exist like Scaleco and others who focus on acquisition entrepreneurship and backing entrepreneurs to run businesses. And so if, folks who watch this don't take anything else away from this, let me stop and continue looking in the camera and say this to you. And Pierre, you can take this as well. There is no lack of capital. There is no lack of opportunity, but there is a significant gap in talent and or people who are willing to go after and run these businesses, right? So the biggest gap is people, and because once again, there's organizations who have capital. There's no lack of individuals, especially as you think about baby boomers, retiring, right? I know a lot of people who are looking to get into the healthcare space, as an example, because there's a theory that, baby boomers are getting older and they're moving down to Florida, and, maybe we should get into home care. Maybe we should get into retirement communities. And I think all of that is great. What I would suggest to you, and what I will continue to evangelize, is that I believe that more people need to think about what is happening with the business or businesses that are allowing these people to retire.
Yeah.
The Exit Institute predicts that, I believe the numbers are, there's approximately 4.5 million businesses that'll be for sale over this decade at a valuation of around $10.5 trillion. And I would suggest that, even within the lower end of the middle market, there are hundreds, if not thousands, of businesses within your community that probably are earning, let's just say, somewhere in the neighborhood of like $500,000 to $2.5 million a year. And they've been doing that for 30 to 50 years. Right. And so the example I use, say within the Black community as an example, entrepreneurship is well known within our community. We tend to be extremely great at bootstrapping, right? Things. And the example I always use with folks is sweet potato pie, right? My mom is an excellent cook. All my aunts are as well. And if your family is being from the South and stuff, if your family is similar to mine, then you got somebody in your family who makes the best sweet potato pie that anybody has ever had.
Absolutely.
Or tasted, right?
Absolutely.
And typically, we every holiday, whether that's Thanksgiving, Christmas, whatever, we get together and you eat that, and people are like, uncle, auntie, grandma, if you opened up a restaurant, I would come and I would eat this sweet potato pie, and we'd be famous and we'd be wealthy and, do all this stuff. And so eventually, for those who are willing to, kind of follow that, you'll open up a restaurant, and, maybe that restaurant's open for, 2 to 5 years, right? Would typically kind of, average business that opens up, and eventually whatever capital the family kind of has runs out. And then, we say we tried, and that's it. From an acquisition entrepreneurship perspective, though, my suggestion would be there's got to be a business that's probably been in existence for 30 to 50 years, and maybe they make pecan pies, right? And if you live in, the greater Pittsburgh area or Boston, which are mostly the areas I kind of, jump in between, that company probably has relationships with any of the regional grocers. So like a Stop and Shop in Massachusetts, right? And they've had distribution, once again, for like 30 to 50 years. And what I recommend is that you find a way to buy that business. And once again, cash flowing somewhere $500,000 to say $2.5 million bucks. And then what you do come this holiday season, you say, for the first time in 30 to 50 years, our business is innovating. And we have the most delicious sweet potato pie that you have ever tasted. Matter of fact, we brought some to share with you today, and share that with your existing clients and their buyers. And you're potentially, and now I'm just pontificating, right? But you potentially have the opportunity to grow your business 50%, 100%, who knows? Because you have a distribution pipeline to then go ahead and distribute a new product that, oh, by the way, we know people love sweet potato pie. It's an amazing opportunity to not only immediately begin building wealth for your family, but to put you in a different lane. And Pierre, what I've said when it comes to acquisition entrepreneurship is this: if you grew up like me, which I believe a lot of people, specifically in the U.S., didn't come from a lot of means or anything else, but you were told, you know what, get the best grades you can in high school, get into the best college or university that you can, get the best grades there so you can get a job with an amazing company, and hopefully make six figures one day. And if you make six figures, then, your life is set, right? And that's fine. And for those of us who've been blessed, to kind of climb that corporate ladder and to make it to the top, in whatever capacity, but let's just say, some sort of executive or leadership role, you've made it to the top only to realize that that ladder was up against the wrong wall the whole time.
Wow.
And acquisition entrepreneurship and what we're talking about today, along with other things, is really an opportunity to take that ladder and put it up against the right wall, which is ownership. And from the time you've put that ladder on there, you have opportunities to lift talented people that, you've seen, friends, former colleagues, etc., family, and to have them go on this journey with you, which is a little bit different than if you're attempting to do that in kind of a more formal structure, from like a corporate setting. And obviously we could go deeper on that, if you feel the time is worthy of doing so. But yeah, it's something I'm extremely passionate about, man. And I've been blessed to have some folks in my life who basically were able to take what I like to say is I took this dream that I had as a teenager.
Yeah.
As I met owners, working at the country club, et cetera, it became an aspiration because I was able to actually see people and have conversations with them, so I could aspire to be like them. And then as I met some mentors of mine, Charles Bracken, Bob Lopes, Brendan Anderson, all folks who have run companies that were private equity backed or sold businesses, continue to run and grow businesses. Those folks allowed me to know that it could really be a goal. Right, John West, and so I began to kind of set targets a little bit more, and until now it's my reality, and I get the opportunity to partner with some amazing folks, our team here at PSP, and build on an amazing foundation. As I mentioned, nearly 80 years old, founded by four psychologists in 1946 to answer this question of, what is the right fit, for individuals, and to be able to do that once again for 7 decades, almost 8 decades now. We plan on continuing to add value, and believe that we have a significant opportunity to continue to, do that at an even larger scale, than the client partners that we've historically worked for decades at this point. And so it's exciting, and yeah, clearly I'm on talking to you live.
Listen, we'll definitely have to do a part 2 to this conversation. I know people who watch live or watch the replay of this, deeply intrigued, taking notes, additional perspective that we need from you about this journey. But coming down to the end of this, and I know you whetted so many appetites. I call this section of Courageous Conversations Live, I call it shameless plug time. So
I have a really good one. My computer is about to die randomly, so let me plug this in. I'm not sure if this has happened on live before either, but let me plug it in real quick.
So you plug it in, and I'll set up shameless plug. And the reason why we do shameless plug time here on Courageous Conversations Live is that we recognize that many of us we're just one conversation away. You're one conversation away. You're one Zoom call, one phone call, one LinkedIn inbox message or text message away from a connection that will change your life. So as we bring guests on Courageous Conversations Live, you never know if that guest, if that subject matter expert, if that leader, entrepreneur, creative is the connection or call that you've been waiting for. So we invite all of our guests to shamelessly plug opportunities to connect and network with them. So talk to us.
That's perfect, man. So I'm gonna take this in 2 directions. Since we're doing it shamelessly, I'm just gonna take a little liberty on this. And so I work in the human capital management space. And so if you have a desire to help organizations drive change through people, and you're a industrial organizational psychologist, OD leader, or even need direct help, with your organization driving change through people, connect with me. I want to connect with you, CEO, executive, CHRO, otherwise. Would love to connect with you and find ways that we can build together. And then with my second role as an operating partner with ScaleCo, I would also say, if you are a business owner and you're watching this, and looking for an opportunity that you can spend more time with your grandchildren or family or anything else, but are looking for some people who are extremely passionate about being able to maintain and uphold and grow legacy, either family or founder-owned businesses, then also reach out to me. Would love to connect you with my business partners, Brendan Anderson, Mike David, and the rest of the team at ScaleCo. We're always looking for those ways to connect with entrepreneurs. Super excited to do so. And then finally, because I'm just going to add one more while I'm shamelessly plugging, my good friend, Pierre Quinn, and I have had some conversations about the amazing value that he's been able to add to organizations as we're thinking about, consulting and leadership, et cetera. And I'm going to say on this live today, if you are running a leadership, consulting organization, and once again, kind of fall into a need for some, let's say, additional capital in order to continue to grow, are looking for some young, dynamic, experienced individuals that are continuing to innovate and grow themselves, reach out to Pierre and I, because we're looking for some people that we can partner with, or potentially, even acquire, moving forward. So reach out to either of us. He has all my contact information and can get in touch with me. But I think we got some cool things on the horizon, and we're just looking to have those conversations.
First time here on Courageous Conversations Live. You heard it. You've heard we spent a little over 30 minutes talking about these topics, and then to have that invitation extended to you. That's why you're here. That's why you're watching the replay of this, and you're here for this conversation. Didn't I listen? This is the first, you said it. This will be the first time here on the show, and it's the first. I'm looking forward to. Well, first, I want to thank you in advance for the people who are going to reach out to you on IG, on LinkedIn, who they've already Googled you, read the articles, and he does know what he's talking about. Yeah, those individuals who are going to reach out to you and connect, and I know some amazing things are going to happen as a result of that connection. I thank you in advance for the work that I know we'll continue to do together, the transformative work that we'll continue to do together. And I got to thank you for just being a guest on Courageous Conversations Live and opening up your insight and your experience and what you've planted today, the seeds that you've planted to help others begin to dream big and to start to build on that dream. Thanks for hanging out today.
Absolutely, man. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, we'll talk soon, okay?
All right. Take care.